Even when we were doing, now with Laura, the Phoenix, like that, I enjoyed the challenge of that, of writing those scenes, this woman. And see, because the show had a basic intensity that propelled, that fueled one's writing, that you could always get, identify with the intensity. Of course, I loved the, writing the Barnabas thing. I remember one particular moment that I cherish, and that was when Barnabas first came to Collinwood, and David was showing him through the old house, which had been his childhood home, where he had been happy. He'd been David's age at that time. And of course he's a vampire, and he is in his coffin and comes out at night. And I ended the show with David saying to Barnabas, he said, there's one thing I want to show you. Promise me that you'll let me show it to you. And Barnabas says, well, what is it? He says, no, promise that you'll let me show it to you. And Barnabas says, aren't you going to tell me what it is? No, you have to promise me, and then I'll tell you what it is and everything at the end. And Barnabas says, all right, I promise. You can show it to me. What is it? And he said, I want you to come with me sometime to the top of the house and watch the sun rise. I loved that. I loved it. You don't get a chance to write a scene like that every day. See, we had elements like that that challenged the imagination, and because that was the thing about writing a show, was that you could let your imagination go, and that's where all good writing comes from. It comes from your imagination, and this was a show that provided an entree for your imagination to exercise itself in ways that would not have happened in another context, in another show. Definitely Jonathan, brought a kind of dignity to the character of Barnabas, the kind of inherent dignity, and that made it more interesting for us to work with. And Nancy Barrett, I thought, is a superb actress. She was doing, of course, Alexandra was good, and Kathy Lee Scott. Louis was fun to write for, and see, I wasn't on the show when Lara Parker came on, when Angelique came on, and I'm sorry now that I left to do that documentary, because I would have been there for a lot of the fun when they went back in time, and that was too bad. So I missed working with her. But I thought that, when I would watch the show, I would write the show, then I'd watch the show, and they would really, say, oh, that's pretty. It was the acting. It was the acting, the way they did it, and how they gave it everything they had. Joan Bennett was not the greatest actress who ever lived, but boy, she, talk about giving it everything she had. She really was something to behold. One of the times when we weren't working that much with the Gothic elements of the story was when the guy came back and was going to blackmail her. What was his name? I can't remember his name. Jason McGuire, I think it was Jason McGuire. Okay, when he came back. And I remember I wrote 3 days in succession of her when he was, and she was not going to let him, get the money, because she would say, this is Carolyn's money. These are Carolyn's jewels. This is her inheritance, and I'm not going to give it to her. She was wonderful. She really was. She was great. I want to take back when I said that she wasn't the greatest actress in the world. When she had to be, she was. When she had to be, she was. When she had a strong story, she had the strength as an actress to match it. Probably when she wasn't that involved or something like that, what was she supposed to do? We didn't give her enough. I think I came back because Dan asked me to come back. I think he remembered me and remembered that I had done some viable work for him, and he was looking for somebody. I think it was pretty much as simple as that. By that time he was he was doing House of Dark Shadows, and he was sorely missed. I'm afraid. I go back just a little bit to talk about different ways that the show, different turns that the unexpected turns that the show took, and you may have heard this story, but when we we had Barnabas already, and we were going to work on having a cure for him, and I had the idea that what we would do is that we'd get a doctor would become a character, and the doctor would cure him, but he would be 300 years old or however old he would be, that which we did use. But I think when we were talking about it, and I came up with a name for the doctor, and I said Julius Hoffman, and Bob Costello, the producer, was sitting there, and he says, "Oh, Julia Hoffman," and Dan jumped right. He says, "Yes, Julia Hoffman. We'll make it a woman. We'll make it a woman doctor," and that brought Grayson onto the show and gave a whole new element to what we were doing. And it was only because Bob Costello was making his little joke, and Dan was smart enough to grab onto it and see the possibilities of it. And everybody knows how important that character became. As a matter of fact, she became so important that at one time, it was when I left the show, and the plotting at the time was that we were going to get rid of her, and the way I planned it, the way it came that was that Barnabas was going to upend her in an acid vat, and she would just dissolve away into the acid. But of course, Grayson began getting all these fan letters, and rightly so. And they said, "We're not," in the same way with the Barnabas character. If the audience is responding this wonderfully to this character, to this actress, we're not going to put anybody in an acid vat. And so she escaped the acid vat and became a character for the rest of the show. What happened by changing it to Julia and bringing Grayson on the show, that's how Sam came onto the show. Because when they were looking for a writer, sometimes he says, "Well, my husband is a writer," and so he came onto the show, and with his particular talents, and that that changed the show too. So all these it's strange how things will develop, and they're serendipitous little moments, and you grab them, as Dan knew how to grab them, and you run with it.